Hi students, I'm Lakshmi Anil from the Department of English, Bharata College, Thrikkakara. So today we are going to travel back to the late 14th century England and meet a man who found English as a dialect and left it as a language. With him is born a real poetry, says Matthew Arnold. By this you must have got some sort of an idea whom I'm talking about. He's a much celebrated, highly unique and very popularly called as the father of English poetry. Yes, none other than Geoffrey Chaucer. He is regarded as a pioneer in poetry, and not just that, humor, and most importantly, characterization. So as we are talking about Geoffrey Chaucer, the very first work that would immediately pop up in your mind would be the Canterbury Tales. So in this video lecture, we will be talking about Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, and to be very precise, the general prologue. Now you might be thinking, why Canterbury Tales? To put it very simply, it has stood the test of time, and even today, millions and millions of copies of this particular work is sold worldwide. And most importantly, the beauty is about this work is its characterization, because Chaucer has beautifully portrayed all the 29 characters wonderfully. And if you look at this particular work, you can very clearly see how the medieval English spirit was. So without wasting any time, let's jump into the general prologue of the Canterbury Tales. So very first thing I want you to think about is that you are going on a journey, a 55-mile long journey, so very tedious, and you are on a horse. So I said we are traveling back to the late 14th century, and the only mode of transportation would definitely be on top of a animal, and you chose it to be a horse. So you are on top of a horse and you're going on a 55-mile long journey along with people that you have no clue about. They are from different class, who are doing different occupations, so you're not very quite acquainted with them. So what do you do to pass the time? You're going together with these 29 people, so you need to do something, because that was an age where you did not have smartphones and things like that. So one best way is to tell the tales or tell stories, and this is a crux or the basic idea or the essence of this particular work. Chaucer's Canterbury Tales is basically about a work about storytelling leading to storytelling, where there are 29 pilgrims along with the narrator. There are 30 pilgrims, and they are on their way to the Canterbury Cathedral, where they're going to the shrine of St. Thomas Becket. And on their way, the whole idea is to tell tales. Each pilgrim has to say 2 tales on the way to the Canterbury Cathedral and on the way back. So each person has to say 4 tales. So you do the math. How many tales would be there totally? A total of 120 tales. But let's see how many totals or how many tales are there in total actually. So before we move on to that, you should be knowing what a pilgrimage is. Pilgrimage is basically where a group of people or maybe a single person visits a shrine for their faith, and in this particular context, they are going to, as I mentioned, to the Cathedral of St. Thomas Becket. So as I said, there should be 120 tales, but here you can see only 24 tales. And the most interesting part is, in these 24 tales, Chaucer has written only 22 of them in total, completed only 22 of them, and the remaining 2 tales were incomplete. And so, the whole plot of this particular work wasn't fully completed by Chaucer, so there should be 120 tales in total, but only 24 of them came out. Now this idea was put forth by the person or the host of this particular Tabard Inn, and he says that the person who tells the best tale will be getting a free meal when they get back. So this is the added advantage or the price that they're looking forward to. Now, before we move on to the characters and the idea of the plot, let's see who Chaucer is. So as you can see in the PPT, here you know that he's an author, a bureaucrat, an alchemist, a courtier, and a diplomat. And as I mentioned in the introduction, he's the father of English poetry. Now, he was called the father of English poetry by the one and only Dryden. It was Dryden who named him so and so. And when I'm talking about the Canterbury Tales, Milton calls Canterbury Tales, or Milton says Canterbury Tales as "Here's God's plenty." Why? You will know it shortly. And most importantly, Chaucer was the very first poet to be buried in the corner of Westminster Abbey. Now, Who are the pilgrims? I said there are 30 of them in total. You can see from host till the partner, there are 30 of them, even the lines I have mentioned. Now, the beauty of this particular work is Chaucer's Pilgrims represents all classes, all professions in medieval English. So if you want to know about the society or how people were, the different kinds of occupation that was there in the medieval English, you don't have to Google it up and give or spend a lot of time into it. Just see the Canterbury Tales, because all these 30 characters very explicitly brings out the essence of the medieval English period, and therefore definitely you can very well understand the reason why Chaucer was called the father of English poetry. Now, in this presentation, I have divided the class because, as I mentioned before, here Chaucer brings out 30 characters, and these 30 characters are from different classes of the society, starting with nobility, followed by clergy, middle class, and peasants. One thing you have to know is that the middle class was just emerging during this period. So each of these characters, or the 30 characters, belongs to these 4 categories. So in nobility, we have the knight and the squire. Clergy, the monk, prioress, and so on. Middle class, the merchant, the weaver of Bath. And peasant category, we have miller, plowman, and so on. But you have to know this very well, because in these characters, you will know the importance or how faithful they are to the profession that they do, which will give you a better insight or better understanding about the character and about this particular work. Now, this is how the story goes. The narrator introduces the whole idea, and it happens on a spring season. So everybody is at Tabard Inn. Tabard Inn basically means sleeveless coat. So their symbol is sleeveless coat. So that is the whole idea, or the name, or the Tabard Inn name stands for the sleeveless coat. And they are all in the Tabard Inn. And the host, Harry Bailey, he says that, all right, so we're all going on a pilgrimage. So what we have to do is we have to entertain ourselves, isn't it? We can't simply, go and, it's going to be a really tedious journey. So we need to keep entertaining ourselves. So he decides that we'll do one thing. We'll tell a tale. Each of us would be telling 2 tales on the way and from our way to the cathedral or on our way back. So everyone agrees to it, but there's a clash happening. They are thinking who would start the tale, because there are 30 people, so they do not know who will start it. So definitely one way to solve the whole issue is to take a lot. So the lot has been taken, and the first person who tells the tale is the knight, who belongs to the nobility class or the military class. So as the knight is about to tell the tale, the first person who interrupts him is the miller, because miller interrupts and says that I want to start the tale. So there's a little bit of a clash happening. So here's the first theme. Rivalry is an important theme that you can initial part of the plot itself you can see between the knight and the miller. Now, there are, I said, 24 tales. We're not going into detail with all the tales. We're basically dealing with the characterization. So there are 4 genres in which these tales form. First one is fabuleux. Fabuleux is basically, or it deals with bawdly humor, adulterous humor. So we have a few characters who comes up with such tales. Next, we have bestiary. Bestiary, as the name suggests, definitely dealing with animals, where animals play a very important role. Sermons. Sermon is another genre that you can see. Here, sermon basically means a lecture, a long lecture, more or less on a religious or a moral subject. So here we can see the very last character, the very last pilgrim, who's a parson. The parson's tale has got sermon, and he is considered as one of the best characters in this particular pilgrimage. Next, we have courtly love. Courtly love is between a knight and a noblewoman. So these are the 4 genres in which these tales can be categorized into. Now, as I mentioned, there are 30 characters. To know how good these characters are, or do they do justice to their community or their occupation, we need to know, or we need to understand certain codes. So the code of chivalry, as the name suggests, it basically deals with knighthood and the nobility class. So as you can read, a knight must be true to his God, should be loyal to his lord, to his lady, must be humble and modest. This is the exact code of chivalry that a knight should follow, and in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, our knight also follows these basic qualities. So Chaucer himself says that he's a verily perfect gentle knight. So he's a very truly perfect gentle knight. That is what Chaucer is trying to say. So very clearly it's written that he has fought 14 mortal battles, and he's very modest, he's very humble, somebody who very rightfully, you can see a knight means you can very well look into Chaucer's knight because he follows all these codes of chivalry. And code of clergy. We have many characters belong to the many ecclesiastical characters or the clergy characters. So those people should be chaste and pure, must be devoted to God, obey God and biblical law, take vows of poverty, and a lot of other features. But are our characters, especially prioress, do they actually, are they actually true to their occupation? If you read the Canterbury Tales, you will know not at all. The prioress, her name, you can see, her name is Eglantine, and she's a nun, she's the head of a convent, but she's got a pet, she's got a puppy, which is not very likely or not a behavior that is likely for a Middle English nun or a medieval English nun shouldn't be having pets at her own place. And another thing is that she gives a lot of importance to table manners, and very small detail yet very important is that on her brooch it's written love conquers all, but her love is only towards animals. You do not see her love towards people. So that there you can see a contrasting character, and you can question if the people belong to the clergy actually are they actually worthy to be in that community. You can read it for yourself and find it out. Especially you will be knowing it once you read their tales, because as you move on to their tales, you will understand, you'll get a better idea about or a better clarity about their characterization. So these are the few code of conduct that you should keep in mind while going in detail with the tales. Now, another important character or fact is that Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer follows 7 deadly sins. These are 7, the 7 deadly sins, and these 7 deadly sins are not there right onto your face, you may not see it, but if you read the tales, you can very well compare, or you can equate it with the 7 deadly sins. So these pilgrims, as and when they're telling their tale, you can see that 7 deadly sins can be seen. But however, you may not see that the 7 deadly sins may not be seen in the knight's tale. At the same time, in Parson's tale, you will not be seeing these 7 deadly sins. But other tales, very explicitly, you can see. Now, some of the moral virtues, as you can see in the presentation, these are the moral virtues. As you read it, you should understand that Parson is one person having all these virtues. That's why Chaucer calls him as one of the best characters in this particular work. Now, this is how it starts. 1 the April with his chaussure. Now, this line has been an inspiration for multiple writers. To name a few, definitely T.S. Eliot and The Wasteland. When Chaucer says 1 the April with his chaussure, he says that the month of April is one of the most beautiful seasons, the spring season. But T.S. Eliot takes inspiration from these lines, and he says in The Wasteland, April is the cruelest month of all. So the essence has been taken, but the feeling or the emotion has been completely changed. A similar one would be Robert Browning. He in his poem Home Thoughts from Abroad also brings out the same idea. Not like T.S. Eliot, but almost the same idea even Browning brings in. So the season of the Canterbury Tales, it starts during springtime, April, the springtime. You have to keep that in mind. The destination is to the shrine of St. Thomas Becket, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury. He was in fact killed by Henry the Second. He was murdered by Henry II inside the cathedral. Current location is Tabarden, where you have the host. His name is Harry Bailey. And the condition is that 2 tales have to be said on your way to the cathedral and on your way back. And the prize is a free meal for the best tale. Now, some of the highlights that you have to know is that the character development in Chaucer is Chaucer's strength. Because, as I mentioned earlier, if you want to know about the medieval English period, you just have to take this book and just read. It's very clearly there. So all these characters very, very explicitly brings out the essence of the medieval English period. And how does he do it? He uses physical descriptions, tales, and how these pilgrims react to these tales. These are very, very minute details, isn't it? So these minute details helps us in understanding the essence of these characters. Now, there are a few pictures, as you can see. These are some of the important characters that you have to know. As I mentioned, one of the most important character would be Weave of Bath. Weave of Bath is somebody who belongs to almost the middle class, and her name is Alison, and she's got gapped tooth, and that's why she's got a very adulterous nature she has. So these are the few important characters that you have to keep in mind. So the knight, definitely the prioress, whose name is Eglantine. Then we have the Weave of Bath, and of course the parson. These are, among the 30 people, these are the very, very, very important people, but you have to know all of them irrespective of which class or caste they belong to. So you have to know everything, but these are the few important characters. And one more fact that I have to tell you is that Chaucer also comes as a pilgrim. So Chaucer, the author, and Chaucer as a pilgrim are two different characters. You shouldn't, think that both of them are single people. Now, to conclude the whole lecture, what you have to know is that this story is about storytelling. And it is brought about in a very, very humorous way. So it deals with life, class, romance, and gender. And the church. The church during that time, it was corrupted, and Bible translations were coming into being. So church kind of understood that their powers are getting reduced. So that clash can also be very well seen. Changes in social structure. Because as I said, the emergence of middle class people and the social structure slightly changed. Anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a very important concept where you have a kind of a racist or a prejudice or a discriminatory behavior towards a certain class, especially to the Jews. You can see this particular concept in the tale of the prioress. Love, sex, fellowship, betrayal, brotherly love, all can be very beautifully seen in this work of art. So, to conclude, what I have to say is that this particular work by Geoffrey Chaucer called the Canterbury Tales is a storytelling that leads to a storytelling where symbols converts into themes, and these characterization illuminates the realities of the past. So these are the few things that you have to keep in mind, and the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer would definitely be a very interesting experience for you to learn further. So this video lecture, the whole idea is to trigger you to go into depth into these particular tales so that each and every character sounds more relatable to you. Thank you.